fabulous Friday. We are in the Economic Development and Tourism Committee meeting. My name is Deirdre Bartman. I'm chairperson of the meeting. Ms. Adams, let me just check if we are recording and online on YouTube.
We are recording, Chair. Candice, are we online? Are we on YouTube?
Good morning, Chair. Yes, we are.
Thank you so much. Okay. Today we will be receiving a briefing by the Department of Economic Development and Tourism in Wesgro on the following: Delta Airlines and the ability to fly to Cape Town, the film permit in the Western Cape, attracting the film industry to the Western Cape, and remote working visas, electronic visas, and the issuing of visas. This will be followed by a question and answer session. There will be a short break for those at Parliament online who will be moving towards the transport, and then we'll be traveling to the Cape Town Film Studios for oversight, and then we'll be doing a short tour there, and then we'll be returning. Members, I'm going to first allow members to introduce themselves, and then Minister and your delegation, if you can just introduce yourselves, and then we're going to jump straight into the presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, Matlodi Masako.
Morning.
Andreas van der Westhuizen, member of the committee.
Morning.
Good morning. I'm Naomi Nkondlo, member of the committee.
Morning.
Good morning, Gillian Bosman.
Morning. Thank you so much. Minister and CEO of Wesgro, welcome. Minister, if you have any introductory remarks, you're welcome to take the floor now.
Good morning, Chairperson, and good morning to all the committee members. Obviously, I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to brief and update the committee on the whole question of Delta Airlines, of course, film permits and the film industry, and then, of course, on the whole question of remote work visas. So I'm certainly looking forward to the opportunity to brief, and I would like to apologize in advance. I will not be able to join you for your oversight visit to the Cape Town Film Studios, but please do enjoy the visit, and I certainly look forward to hearing about your impressions and your recommendations when it comes to the Cape Town Film Studio.
Thank you so much. I just want to check, Ms. Renelle Stander, if you have any opening introduction remarks that you would like to make before we jump into the presentation. I'm not sure if DDAT and Wesgro is doing the presentation, or just the one or just the other.
Chair, no. Good morning, everyone. We're looking forward to hosting you a little bit later on at the Cape Town Film Studio, and we have the Air Access team that will be doing the presentation this morning. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you so much. Just want to check DDAT. I saw, I think, Mr. Fourie earlier, and I saw Mr. Tofi also. Ah, there we go.
Hi.
Will you be leading the presentation?
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Chairperson. I'm leading the presentation, but I also would just like to introduce some of the colleagues that are here, because it's a tag team effort between DDAT and Wesgro. Can I go ahead and do so? I think Sally has asked me to lead the presentation. So we'll be Ilse van Schalkwyk will be kicking off, or in fact Ilse is going to be talking about. Ilse, are you there? You're going to share the presentation, am I correct? So Ilse is with us today, David King and Paul from the Air Access team, of course. Ansel is here from our team, and then Jacques, our director for tourism, is here as well. Welcome everybody. Welcome to the delegation. I think and of course Renelle is here. So if we're ready to kick off, should we proceed, Chairperson?
Please proceed. I'm just going to put my video off so that you have better bandwidth on both my side and yours.
And I can do the same. So I'm really just I'm really just steering it, but I'd like to hand actually straight over to the team that are managing. Ilse, if you could just flight it and take us to the first slide. So those are the three areas, including a little bit more of the film studio. As you know, you'll do in situ if you like. And then I've asked Paul, if you don't mind, just an impromptu, other than the Delta airline update, if you could just briefly, without a slide even, just tell us how things have progressed and the good news around the United Airlines. So it's always nice to see how hard it's going, but also on the other hand, how in other spheres things are really flowing. So Paul, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashid. Good morning, Chair. Thank you for having us, for having the Cape Town Air Access team. For those of you who don't know Cape Town Air Access, it was established in 2015, basically by the provincial government, so the Western Cape government, City of Cape Town, AXA, so that's the Airports Company of South Africa. They operate 9 airports in South Africa, including Cape Town, South African Tourism, and Cape Town Tourism. And of course, it's based here at Wesgro. One of the tasks was indeed to attract a US carrier. So until 2019, there was no direct route between Cape Town and the US. So basically, there was one of the main wins. So in 2019, United started operating a direct flight between Newark in New York and Cape Town. Of course, it stopped in 2020 in March because of the Omicron, because of the virus. But fortunately, they returned in December last year, December 2021, and the route is doing very well. So 2 weeks ago, we learned from them that they will operate the service whole year round. So instead of only from October till March, what they currently do, they will start operating the route from June onwards, whole year round, with 3 flights per week. So we are connected the whole year round with North America. So we engaged the US since 2016. And before I start, I also would like to give you some updates on the numbers. Maybe that's also some positive news for Cape Town and the Western Cape. So if we look at the international service, the international passengers, just the people that are arriving in Cape Town from overseas, we saw in November that almost 40% recovery compared to 2019. But of course, that went down again in December. Then because of Omicron, slowly it returned in January. We had 35% recovery compared to 2019. But the very good news is basically that the first 3 weeks of February, we're back to 50%. So compared to 2019, we see we're back to levels of 50% compared to 2019. So, and we talk, of course, a lot to airlines. We expect and we'll see that at least until the Easter period, booking and the numbers are looking very good. So we're quite optimistic for the next few weeks that more and more people will return to Cape Town. So that's a short introduction. Then I would like to go to Delta, this part of this presentation. Delta Airlines, like I mentioned, we engaged with the US carriers basically since 2016. And as I mentioned, from 2019, we have United flying to Cape Town, but we also engaged Delta Airlines. Of course, also a major US carrier that actually flew to Cape Town until 2009. Then because of lacking demand, they had to stop the operation. And they mentioned to us, they operate the Johannesburg route. They're very satisfied with that route. That route was actually operated by a Boeing 777. I'm going maybe a bit into technical details, but if you have questions, please ask me. But in March 2020, they came to us just when the virus started, saying that they want to optimize their fleet. So what was happening with the virus is that many airlines had to stop operating. So what they did is they started optimizing their fleet. So that meant that they were phasing out older aircraft. So on the route to Johannesburg, Delta was operating a Boeing 777 extra long range, and that was an older type of aircraft. So it had more fuel burn compared to new kind of aircraft. So they phased that out of their fleet. So they wanted to introduce an Airbus 350, which is the latest technology. But the problem is, of course, as we know, Johannesburg is on a high altitude. And if you take off from a high altitude, the fuel burn is higher. And when it's more warm, it also affects the performance of the aircraft. So because of that, they wanted to introduce a triangular route. So they wanted to operate Atlanta, Johannesburg, Cape Town directly to Atlanta. So that was the plan, and that's what in June 2020 they asked with the South African government, an FOP, as you can see on the slide, a foreign operator's permit, basically to ask if they can operate that route. And as you can see underneath, indeed, the 350 was less powerful, the engines are less powerful, and if it's warm and if you have lots of headwinds, you have to offload passengers. So basically the Joburg Atlanta route is not profitable for them anymore. So to give you an idea, they have to offload, because of the altitude, about 30% of their passengers. So that means only 70% of the aircraft can be filled, which is quite okay now, because if we look at the load factors, that's about 70%. Like I mentioned for Cape Town, but of course in the longer term that's not profitable. So that's why they wanted to operate the triangular route. So that's why they wanted to stop via Cape Town. And what's also important in the industry is bilateral air service agreements. So those are agreements between specific countries. So South Africa has bilateral air service agreements with the US, with Germany, with Zimbabwe, with all the countries in the world basically. And it mentions how many flights you can operate between countries and to which cities you can operate. So it's quite technical, and most of those negotiations were done basically end of the 90s. So of course, end of the 90s, South African Airways was still very strong. So that means they had a big say also in the bilateral. So for example, in the US, bilateral, it says that South African Airways can fly to certain cities in North America, like New York, like Washington. Those were flights that they were operating in the past. But of course, currently in the current situation, they can't. So currently, there's 21 routes between that US carriers can fly into South Africa. So it was also mentioned that the triangular route, according to the US interpretation, is possible. But as mentioned, the South African government interpreted it differently, saying it's not allowed to. So those are the things that are currently under discussion. And there's legal opinions have been sent. And that this is currently continuing in the DOT, but until now there's no response. What's also interesting is that in the past, as you can see, and what's currently also still happening, is that some routes are allowed to operate triangular routes into South Africa, or operating into into more than 2 cities. So that's called co-terminalization. That basically means that an airline is allowed to operate into more cities into a country than just one. So you can fly from Johannesburg, but also to Cape Town. So that means co-terminalization. And if you look in the past and currently still, then you see, for example, that Emirates operates a flight between Dubai, Johannesburg. From Johannesburg, it goes to Durban, and from Durban, it goes direct into Dubai. So those triangulars still exist. In Cape Town, we have a similar kind of example. We have Singapore Airlines flying from Singapore to Johannesburg, and from Johannesburg to Cape Town, and also Etihad Airways coming, of course, from Abu Dhabi. They operated a route between Abu Dhabi, Johannesburg, and Cape Town between 2009 and 2012. And they basically wanted to start operating this again from December 2021, and started operating this for 3 months period, basically to bring traffic from Abu Dhabi and from other areas in the world to Cape Town. So this was approved in history, but basically the DOT mentioned that they were not allowed to operate it this year. So that's why Etihad, for example, decided only to operate to Johannesburg and not to operate the Johannesburg route. So as you can see, there's quite some inconsistencies into the interpretation of the bilaterals. And basically, if you have historic rights, that means that you can operate those routes also now. So the application what the Delta has done basically in 2020. That was they reached out to us, to both Wesco as well as to the minister. So Minister Manie has been very active, and you can go to the next slide, Ilse. So the lobby basically started, and basically from June 2021, Wesco and the minister have been involved in the process, sending letters to the DOT, Department of Transportation, letters addressed to Minister Bulula from Transport, but asking indeed why is this route that Delta wants to operate, why can't this be operated? Because if you look at our interpretation, it's possible to operate. So until now, basically, we haven't received any response on this. And as mentioned, we foresee and we see, as I mentioned before, that the number of passengers will grow. The US market has been always very important for Cape Town and the Western Cape, and for South Africa itself, of course, as well. Like I mentioned, there's 21 flights that the US carriers can operate per week. And if you're looking now at the recovery, then we see that the US market is recovering quicker than other markets. So we expect that these 21 frequencies will be needed soon. And with the expansion of United, you can see that's going to happen soon. What's also important for the economy is not only the passengers, but of course that's also air cargo. And that's also something that's becoming more and more important for Cape Town and the Western Cape. It's important for our exports, and of course also to import products. So to improve the trade situation with North America, it's important to have the direct routes also to the US. So what we're seeing now is that Delta came back to Johannesburg and they started operating this route again because they don't want to lose market share. But as I mentioned, they can only operate load factors up to 70%. So the route is not profitable. So that means if the triangular route will not be approved in the future, it might be in the longer term that they even will pull out. So it's also a threat for the South African economy and also for Cape Town, of course. So how do the Delta passengers currently travel? As you can see, a direct route is always better, because when we have a direct route, we have done research within Cape Town Air Access. That means that there's route stimulation. That means that there's at least 25% additional passengers coming to the market. So if we have a direct route from Atlanta to Cape Town, it means that there will be 25% more passengers compared to if it's not direct. So most of the times people fly now via Amsterdam. So those flights with KLM, they're currently also full. They're really doing well. But if KLM loses that traffic, then we are sure they will find feeder traffic from other markets. So the direct route will be beneficial for all of us. And as you can see, the situation also has changed. So last week, we received basically the good news that Delta wants to start operating a direct route, basically from November this year, November 2022. But that needs to be approved still by the DOT as well. So they need to approve that Delta can operate the direct route. And we expect also on that side, there might be issues, but because there's currently no licensing department within the DOT to approve this routing. So we experience that with more routes, with more countries, with countries that and routes that want to operate a route to South Africa and to Cape Town. But currently, because there's no licensing department, it's very difficult for new airlines that want to start operating routes to Cape Town, that they don't get a permit to start operating. And hopefully, beginning of next week, we can share some good news, more good news, because we expect that another airline will soon make a decision to start operating direct flights to Cape Town. But we are currently in discussion together with the support of the minister, with the DOT, to have this resolved. But currently there's no movement within the Department of Transportation. There's no feedback. There's no licensing department. So it means it can, it will basically have a bad effect on the economic growth potential, not only for the country, but of course also for Cape Town and the Western Cape. So we hope, and we keep on lobbying that this will be resolved. And that's what Delta mentioned. In order for them to keep that route operating, also from Johannesburg, they want still to operate the triangular route. So that's their preference. So it means that the process will continue. So this is an end to my briefing. So I'm not quite sure if there's questions now or if we're doing the questions at a later stage. I can understand that you have questions, but this is end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. My sense, I think the way that we'll do this is we'll continue through to the rest of the briefing and then take all the questions. Chairperson, if you don't mind, we will continue, okay?
Yes, please. Otherwise, it's going to be too many questions and answers at the same time.
Thank you. So let's proceed then. Monica?
Morning. Apologies. I thought I'd be at the studio already. I wanted to have a beautiful background from the boardroom there. Can we see the next slide, please? I'm really there. My driver's great, though. So we've been working a lot in permitting the province, making it film ready. We used to call it film friendliness, but permits are uneven. And we need to make sure that everyone feels welcome and has quick turnaround so we can get all the small shoots that are going in the world. And also when we land those big shoots, everybody's assured. Even now, through the ecosystem that Minister set up, we have got a big shoot from the UK using national key points, and it's because we all pull in the same direction. Obviously, I can't say what those key points are or what the show is, but thank you very much for always being ready to make film a priority sector for industry. It is an intangible asset manufacturing process. It's as if a big factory has shown up and but they might all be in town for a day or two. And this inclusive action plan that the strategic resource in DDAT under Elsa Ansel Venter is helping put together, just over here, thank you, is making sure that when we close gaps, the next level of gaps, we will make even more business happen here. The other support we're doing is always the visas and locations assistance, as I just described. We've got companies from the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, France, Australia, India, Russia, and the UK, and obviously the US. In the could you help me with my bag, please? In the country at the moment, and the team, together with the tourism and the trade and services, are doing wonderful jobs making sure that they feel welcome, that they're getting the recce's they need, and that everyone is pulling in this direction. We have always worked together with the cross-sectoral work, the lobbying for removal of red lists, etc.
Monica, can you hear me? Monica?
I'm just going to try to get the light right. There, now you can see this. Thank you so much, Ishmael. You can see that we have built a lot of infrastructure here and that we can indeed make this huge industry happen. It's an exemplar of the fourth industrial revolution. Africa Games Week is in town. I think that'll be on the next slide, but thank you. These are called industry events. We have the Africa Games Week Festival. We have AAA investors. The largest gaming company in the world is in town. They're looking for partnerships. They have 3 pillars. That one company has 3 pillars, including a corporate sort of CSI. It's fantastic meeting them and connecting them to our big companies like the Sea Monsters. In fact, PAG was announced on day 1 of Africa Games Week, which is 20 companies, 20 countries, and billions of people. Sorry, I'm just getting a call. I hang up. Chair, is everything okay? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes. Thank you. You may go ahead.
Sorry, I think I lost my mic. Is everything okay? Were you struggling to hear me?
We can hear you.
Monica,
Apologies.
Monica, can you hear me?
Apologies.
It's Rashid
Yes.
here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Can you
Monica,
hear me?
we're in front of the standing committee here. Could I ask that we go to one of the other slides, and that when you are settled and in a place that you can present properly, we come
Thank
back
you.
to you, please?
Apologies for that. I'll do
if
that.
you could please, you could switch
I'll
off
be
your
in the
camera.
boardroom in a minute. Thank you.
Switch off your camera and I will be in contact with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ilse, if you could please, apologies for that, standing committee members and chairperson. Let's go on to the next presentation, and perhaps someone from the Westgrove team could present those slides in Monica's stead if she is moving around like that. So Ilse, will you please proceed with the remote working visa presentation? Thank you.
Will do. Thanks, Rashid. Thank you, committee, just for this opportunity to present on the work we've done with the remote working visa. So just as a short update in terms of where we are. Give me a second. There we go. So we started with the lobbying work. It was in response with regards to our recovery plan for tourism, and based on the COVID-19 pandemic and what we were seeing with regards to international tourists and the different markets closing, how were we able to attract successfully different countries and different tourists that were able to work from anywhere. So part of this work, we were starting to look at what does the visa requirements need in order for us to enable this situation to happen, and that basically sits in the Immigration Act. And we started doing benchmarking exercises to look at different countries who actually changed their Immigration Acts accordingly to enable this. And globally, there's been a substantial increase of the remote working visa provisions in different countries, and it has a massive impact in terms of the economy. So they mostly stay between about a year. That's about the average period in terms of that they allow specific individuals with the right requirements into the country. In terms of this particular, the effort, we focused on three key levers. The first thing that we undertook was to develop the remote working visa submission. We worked with our ease of doing business team, we worked with our legal service team, etc., and we prepared a submission to the National Minister of Home Affairs as well as National Department of Tourism, because it dovetails between the two, in order to highlight the specific legalities in terms of the policy element that needed to be amended to enable this, and what would be the proposed suggested requirements for somebody, so that it's not open to anybody. There's specific requirements that we proposed to enable somebody to apply and be successful in attaining a remote working visa. So that was done and submitted in 2021. And then the second element that we worked on is the remote work portal. This was work that Westgrove undertook. They focused, and there's the URL if you'd like to go and have a look at that, where it was working with, in absence of having the regulations come online, how do we start working in this in terms of our current 3-month visa that they could attain, as well as domestic individuals who would want to relocate to the Western Cape and work from here. So the remote working portal really, the objective was to entice people from around the country to visit our destinations. It had a very much a domestic focus at that stage. It creates easy to use toolkits. It had great compelling Euro videos. So there was a whole campaign behind this, as well as different assets and campaigns. It speaks to how easy it is to work from the province. Westgrove also partnered with Day One, who it's a relocation specialist company that provides assistance for individuals that want to work from anywhere, helping them set up, dealing with any other of their concerns or requirements when they want to relocate. And this has been quite successful. The third element in our approach was to deal with the digital nomad campaign. As I mentioned, that was almost the campaign side of the remote working portal, as I mentioned, and I've included the link to the video for you to watch. So how did we fare in terms of it, just as an update further on? So after we did the submission, because this is almost, if I can say that it's one of our constraints currently in terms of getting the international remote worker into the country, is that the policy has to change. and DDAC made the submission through Minister Mania, and there's been various follow-ups, and basically there hasn't been an appetite. Minister Mania also raised this again on numerous occasions with the respective ministers at the different platforms, the MINMEX, etc. And there was not a response in terms of saying that they're working on it. We followed up with the National Department of Tourism, their policy unit, and it's now, I can report that yesterday there was a NTSS, which is a national meeting with National Department of Tourism, where they've said also post the SONA that they have started now engaging more earnestly with Home Affairs to start getting this considered in terms of the changing the Immigration Act. So we are hoping that there's a better level of support and effort from National Department in relation to this. And then just to note that the latest update is that the e-visa pilot, which is just that to make it easier, so not just changing the policy, but also the system that's in place for visas, will be extended into 50 new markets, which is very promising in terms of making sure that our e-visa system is up and running, and which was quite a concern a number of years ago. And then, yes, as I mentioned, this coincides with that Home Affairs, and they are working with the State Security Agency to increase the number of visa-exempt countries, which is also very promising, to make it, once again, easing the regulation and easing the accessibility of the country. And then all the Western Cape's core international markets are visa-exempt. Therefore, the rollout of the e-visa system is not a major determinant in driving recovery, although it will assist us mostly with regards to attracting new markets into the Western Cape. So I think that is it from our side. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much. Mr. Tufi, is there someone who would like to deal with the film permits, or is Ms. Rovik, are you with us?
Chairperson, can I suggest that I apologize if Monica is not yet settled. Can I suggest that we possibly do Q&A on the other matters, and then we come back to her if she is ready?
No problem. Colleagues, what we'll do then is let me just put my video on. Okay. Colleagues, what we're going to do then is we're going to take questions on the Delta Airlines update and the remote working visas update, and then we're going to come back to the film permits session. Thank you. I see a hand, Minister. Do you have a question?
Thank you, Chairperson. I just wanted to make a supplementary point on the Delta Airlines matter, just to give you an update. We have received a very recent item of correspondence from the Minister of Transport, who has requested, in his own words, our final indulgence and an opportunity to urgently deal with this matter. And I have referred that letter to legal services to take advice on how we should reply given the intergovernmental framework. That is a very recent piece of correspondence, and we are currently taking advice on the next step. But I can assure members of the committee that we will continue to take up this very important matter with national government so that we can resolve the dispute in relation to co-terminalization and Delta Airlines.
Okay, Minister, I'm just going to ask you now because I know the question is likely going to come up. What was the response from the National Minister? Because it doesn't help you just say that you've referred it to legal to answer, because sometimes when I refer letters to legal, it means I don't agree with the answer I received. So was it a positive answer? Was it a negative answer? Just so we just have a bit more clarity on that.
So the latest state of play is I've received a very recent item of correspondence, a letter from the National Minister of Transport, where he requests our final indulgence and an opportunity to urgently deal with the matter. So there is no substantive response to our disputes. He is simply asking for our final indulgence and an opportunity to deal with this matter. What I've done is I've referred the letter to legal services, And I've done so because I want to take advice on how to respond, because of course we are in an intergovernmental dispute, and I'm going to take advice on how to appropriately respond within the intergovernmental dispute framework.
Thank you so much. Minister, you can lower your hand now because you have asked your question and answered it. Wonderful. Colleagues, you have a new question. Okay. Colleagues, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take questions now. Delta Airlines as well as remote working. Member van der Westhuizen, Member Mkondlo. Okay, I don't see any other hands, so in that order, you may go ahead.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the presentations that we've received this far. In terms of the airlines, I think we all have seen and learned this morning again that essentially it comes down to profit and whether it's an economical route, whether you would, as an airline, be able to recover your cost and make a profit on such a leg for your international flights. Now, my first question is, and my apologies if I have missed such graphics, but what is the long-term growth prediction in terms of numbers from Cape Town to the USA? And secondly, are we geared to, from the South African side, also to market this opportunity for South Africans also to travel? It is my impression, and perhaps you can also just confirm whether that is the case, that up until the 2020 lockdowns, etc., that air travel has been growing quite fast, and that passenger numbers were growing, and that the costs per kilometer were coming down due to fuel efficiency, etc. If you wouldn't mind, and my apologies for the dogs in the background.
Thank you so much. No problem. We are all working within a remote working space. So it's wonderful doing it in this manner while we're also doing it on MS Teams. And so you don't worry too much about your dog barking in the back. Member Mkondlo?
Thank you, Chairperson. Just wanted to understand the remote working visa situation. If you can just explain it in layman terms, what exactly is that? Is the assumption is that a tourist can be in South Africa, a foreign national can be in South Africa, whilst and you're asking for a legal authorization of that person whilst that person is working? I'm trying to understand that first. Secondly, in following up with that question, what would be the security, including security of health implications of this remote working visa, particularly given that we have been seeing and COVID has taught us how countries and economies can be vulnerable health-wise from a COVID point of view, in the transmission of the virus in the fastest way, especially developing economies like ourselves. So, and as you are lobbying and putting more effort into this, what are some of those implications, and what would be the proposals to mitigate such, including security of ensuring that you've got right people, right work, into the country? So I just want to understand more that particular space. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions, or can I put mine now? Okay, I'm going to put mine there now since there weren't that many. On the Delta Airlines update, I'm happy to hear at least that there has been a response from the National Minister, albeit not a substantive one. And we must make it obviously as convenient as possible for tourists to choose South Africa. And in the past, Provincial Economic Review and Outlook, which the minister tabled, it's quite clear that the USA is increasing their tourism to South Africa, and in particular the Western Cape. In that regard, I wanted to find out what are the reasons that Singapore Airlines and Etihad Airlines has not been approved yet, because from what you're saying, it seems that they're more or less in the same boat as Delta Airlines. And then secondly, what is the average hours to fly from the USA to the Western Cape, Cape Town? And what is the difference? What will the decrease be if they're able to fly directly to Cape Town? Because as a tourist, obviously it's in one's advantage to be able to fly as direct as possible for as cheap as possible. And if you maybe have those statistics for Singapore Airlines and Etihad as well, it would be much appreciated. And then on the remote working visas, you mentioned that the e-visa pilot project will be extended to 15 markets. Has this already been implemented? When was it implemented? And how does one go about, for example, with an e-visa in terms of that pilot? How does one apply? Do you go to the bank? Do you go to the post office? Do you go to Home Affairs? How does that work? And you also mentioned Home Affairs is also working with the State Security Agency to increase the number of visa-exempt countries. Is there an idea of which countries they are currently working with? And is there a timeline for some of these items that you're working on in terms of lobbying? Because it's obviously wonderful for government to say we're working on this remote working visa updates and how we're going to attract more people to our country in order for them to spend their money within our tourist industries. But if we can get more or less a timeline as to when we can expect some of these initiatives. If there's no timeline, if we could just understand more or less how long it takes to implement some of these type of projects. Thank you. Mr. Tofi, I'm going to allow you to allocate to whoever needs to answer.
Sure, thank you, Chairperson. Yeah, so let me just briefly, so Paul and David, if you could address the issues from Member van der Westhuizen, but I'd just like to say that one of the powerful aspects of the air access program is this combination of stakeholders. So Member van der Westhuizen, when you speak about marketing the outward flight from Cape Town, that's exactly why we have members like Cape Town Tourism on board, the City of Cape Town, and also SA Tourism. So increasing the traffic on those routes are really important, but I am going to ask you, Paul and David, to answer that in some detail. Ilse will manage the remote working question from Member Nkondlo, as well as your question, Chairperson. And then David, if you could also please answer the questions about Singapore and Etihad, just some of those factors and the advantages, as you said earlier, of that direct flight in terms of time. So let's go ahead. I'll start with you, David, or Paul, on the Member van der Westhuizen's questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashid. I will start. I know a lot of people, many people confuse David and Paul, but it's we'll do it together. But thank you very much. To answer the question of Mr. van der Westhuizen, indeed, what we see, we do a lot of data research. We do a lot of work on routes. So we often look where is the gaps. So until 2019, we didn't have a route to the US. So we saw that New York was our largest unserved market. So that means the largest market where we didn't have a direct flight to. So that's why New York was such an important market to get connected to. If you look at numbers, currently to the US, there's about 220,000 visitors between Cape Town and North America. So that's both inbound as well as outbound. And then you can add Canada. So North America's about 250,000 passengers in total. We just looked at the numbers. So if you look between 2015 and 2019, it's a period of 5 years. Between North America and Cape Town, there was only 1% growth on average in those years. That also had to do because there was no direct service. As I mentioned, whenever there's a direct route, we see market stimulation. And often that's at least 25%. In most cases, it's even 50%. So for example, what we mentioned about New York, saying that it's 50,000 passengers, well, you can add 25% to that number. So that will grow at least by about 15,000 passengers. So that's the numbers that you have to look at. And like I said, we expect the route between North America and South Africa and Cape Town in particular will further grow over the next few years. But of course, that has to do also with macroeconomic developments, the current situation in Europe, for example, that will mean that the oil prices will spike. So it might be that the ticket prices will become more expensive. But of course, that's not that we can do anything about in Cape Town and the Western Cape. As you mentioned, and as Rashid mentioned, there's a lot of tourism promotion in markets. So South African Tourism, of course, has an office in New York. I know that Cape Town Tourism has a cooperation with New York and Company. So that means there's a lot of promotion happening in that market. If you look at the mix of passengers, we currently see on the route that about 80% is inbound. So that means on the route, 80% of the volume comes from the US into Cape Town and 20% is outbound. So that means 20 to 30% is outbound, 70 to 80% is inbound. So that means that 2 or 3 out of 10 will come from Cape Town and the Western Cape that go to North America. So it's a smaller amount. That's most of the times that's the case with most of the routes that we have. But indeed, we also work with United. We work with the airports in North America. We work with the tourism agencies from New York, like I mentioned, New York and Company. They work together with Cape Town Tourism to also promote New York in market over here. So I hope that answers a bit your question. Renelle, I see you have your hand up.
Stop there. Okay, I'm going to assume that that was an accidental hand. You may go ahead, Mr. van der Prank.
Okay, thank you. And to answer your question, Chair, so indeed, like I mentioned, in bilaterals, it's often mentions how routes operate. So like I mentioned, if a route happened in the past, and if the bilateral hasn't changed, it means that that route should be possible to operate. So in case of Etihad, they used to operate the route, exactly the route from Abu Dhabi to Johannesburg to Cape Town, from Cape Town back to Johannesburg to Abu Dhabi. They operated that route between 2009 and 2012. And in the meantime, we checked the bilateral agreement between the UAE and South Africa hasn't changed. So based on historical rights, it means it should be possible to operate this route. So that's also indeed a point that we further need to follow up on that route. If you look at the passengers where they're coming from, their catchment area, their markets are mainly in Europe and the Asian market. And the Asian market is interesting. That's the next point. That's, of course, Singapore Airlines. And if you look at Singapore Airlines, they operated the route 4 times a week between Singapore, Johannesburg, Cape Town, Johannesburg, Singapore. So they have seen growth. So together with the stakeholders involved, we were able to grow that route from 4 times weekly to daily until COVID, of course. And as you know, the Asian market is more closed at the moment. But fortunately, Singapore Airlines is coming back to the route. So from the 1st of March, they will come back operating the route between Singapore, Johannesburg and Cape Town. That route has been approved and it will stay. That route has been approved by the DOT. Problem with Singapore Airlines is not the DOT, that's Home Affairs. Because to operate a triangular route, what they wanted, Singapore, Johannesburg, Cape Town back to Singapore, that's what they wanted to operate because it saves them costs. That has been approved officially by the DOT, but the problem here is Home Affairs because they are afraid of contamination of international passengers with other passengers in Cape Town Airport. And we are trying to prove that that's not happening. So that's also a process that's still that's still happening. And the Asian market, like I mentioned, is important because the average growth between 2015 and 2019 has been 6%. And like I mentioned, whenever there's a direct route, we see also growth on those markets. I see David, you have your hands up. You want to add something?
Yes, thank you, Paul, and thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to talk about this today. I think just from my side to answer your question regarding the flight times, obviously it's much quicker to connect or to fly a direct or non-stop route than to connect through any airport. And in the past with the US traffic, most of the passengers flew via Europe into Cape Town. So you would see that KLM or Lufthansa or British Airways carried a lot of Americans. And those flight times, were anything in the range of 25 to 30 hours. But if you have the direct route with United to Cape Town, it's a 16-hour direct flight. But the issues come in with in what direction you're flying, because if you're flying to America, it takes you've got a lot of headwinds, and you're flying in a difficult position, so it takes a little bit longer. Where if you're flying back to Cape Town, it's with tailwind, so you burn less fuel and it's much easier to reach. So that's why the issues with the triangular is that they want to fly from Cape Town instead of Joburg, because in Johannesburg you've got high altitude and then you'll have headwinds. And Delta had, for a lot of their flights, they have to land in another airport because they weren't able to make the flight to Atlanta from Joburg. So it's also a safety issue. The Singapore Airlines flight takes about, I think it's about 11 hours to Johannesburg, and I think Cape Town would be about 13 hours direct. So currently they stop in Joburg, so it takes about 14 to 15 hours. So there's also a saving there. And then Etihad is, I think, 9 hours direct to Johannesburg. So yeah, it would be about an hour more for Cape Town. Yeah, I just want to add what Paul said. The bilaterals is the framework under which all countries operate, and that enables airlines to fly between countries. So you've got the framework, but then it's up to the Civil Aviation Authority in the country to also approve the operating permit. And there's a little bit of a disconnect now because there's no Air Services Licensing Council, you are only able to operate current approvals. So if you have it in the bilateral that you can fly, then there shouldn't be a problem to fly. But if you want new rights, then the DOT's current viewpoint is, and what we also don't agree with, is they say there's a moratorium on all bilateral decisions until the aviation policy review process is complete. Now that process has been ongoing for more than a year now. Originally they said it would have been finished last year in June. It's almost a year later and we haven't seen any draft or any indication when that policy review will be finished. So it's just creating a lot of pressure in the industry, and it's basically meaning that no airline can expand their services. Even a South African airline won't be able, and there's a lot of examples of FlySafair and Airlink struggling to get routes to other countries because there's no one to approve the routes. So I think it's just creating, and it's hindering economic development in terms of aviation in the country. So hopefully that will be resolved soon.
Thank you, David. Ronelle, would you like to add something before we go to the remote visa matter?
Thank you, Rashid. I think, you know, David and Paul have very clearly articulated the importance of direct flights to the Western Cape. There's quite a big IATA study which correlates, positively correlates connectivity to economic growth. And so it really, really is important that we increase Cape Town's connectivity to the rest of the world. And that's certainly something that the Air Access team is working on quite hard. So I think that was just something that I wanted to conclude with. Thank you, Rashid.
Thank you, Ronel. So Ilse, if you could handle the question from Member Nkondlo and the chairperson. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Rashid. Member Nkondlo, with regards to the remote working visa, if I can put it just very briefly. So basically, it's in the Immigration Act. You've got the regulations that sits behind it. There's different categories of purpose of travel. There's very different or very little differentiation between the categories in terms of a business visa, for example, and the purpose of travel. So what we're proposing is that, one, is it's for a semi-skilled and skilled individual, because what we're trying to encourage is that a individual, they've got to give there's different categories in terms of what are they required or what are we proposing from. So the first thing they have to show a proof of accommodation, proof of employment, a minimum 1-year contract. So they can't be employed from a South African company. They've got to come with an existing work contract. They have to show proof of their minimum income, as well as health insurance and travel documentation has to be in place. So that those are the minimum criteria to enable them to get through the door in terms of to apply for the special type of visa, which has to be amended in both the Immigration Act and its regulations. So if they stay longer, so the entry requirements from a health risk perspective, if it will be the same as similar in terms of any tourist that arrives to South Africa currently in terms of our current regulations in terms of a PCR test, etc. So from a COVID perspective, unless anything changes, and this hasn't even been adopted from a policy perspective, but they would need to be not be tested positive, etc. So from that risk, it's the same no matter who enters our country. But secondly, because they stay in the intention of that is that if they stay for a year, they stay in the country. So there's not that risk of moving between different countries, etc., and that health risk. Although again, the risk sits at proof of a negative test when you enter the country. So that's the decreased risk if they stay for longer. The second part of the submission was also focusing on that we would actually see if we could increase if they apply for a year, and they might then the intention is that they could renew for an additional year for 2 years. So that's the sort of the timeline covering the remote working visa aspects. Then if I can just sort of mention, in addition to that, Chairperson, your questions about the e-visa. So from a timeline perspective, the system has been launched. It's www.southafricavisa.com. So very simple URL you can refer to. We can also send that to you. They trialed the e-visa. So basically it's a web application. You no longer have to go into an embassy. They trialed it and it was successfully launched. Well, that's what they say it is if we can click through it in February of this year. Secondly, as we mentioned, the 50 countries are exempted currently, of which our major source markets are exempted, which is a positive for the Western Cape. The dates would need to be firmer from Department of Home Affairs in terms of the additional countries they're considering. We haven't received firm timelines in terms of when that process or that investigation will be concluded. We can get back to you in terms of that. We'll engage with Department of Home Affairs. And it is seeming to work and make the process easier, but the exemption state is quite important win for the Western Cape for our key source markets. That's my updates. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much. What I'm going to do is I'm going to allow for short follow-up questions before we go over to the film permits. Going once. Going twice. Okay, I have a follow-up question. I wanted to know in terms of the remote working visa, one of the requirements that you guys are lobbying for, it seems that it's a 1-year contract, you know, when it looks like employment and proof of income and stuff like that. Now, when I think about the film industry and a lot of artists sometimes actually work for themselves. They're freelancers. So you're a creative director or you're a producer or you're a makeup artist or you're a model or whatever you are. And you work through your agency. So you're not necessarily employed by someone. You're almost working for yourself. But I know, for example, some makeup artists, they don't necessarily get a full month's pay, but they get paid per job. So they get bulk payments and they pay their own deductions and things like that. And sometimes a whole month you're completely full, or a whole 6 months you're completely full, and you essentially make your whole year's income, where some months are a little less busy. So is it not possible, like what are the options for a freelancer then in terms of a remote working visa? Because someone could be making actually more money even than someone who's employed and wants to come in and work in South Africa for a longer period of time compared to someone who's just employed, for example. So what do we do? How are we going to assist those freelancers? Can we not, for example, say, can they please just submit proof of their annual income, or for the past year or the past 6 months or something like that? Because when we go overseas, some of the other countries only ask us for 3 months payslip or 6 months payslip, depending. So what are the options for a freelancer? I see Member Nkondlo's hand. You may go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the response, and hopefully we can share. I think I'm interested in the elements that I think Ilsa was explaining of what goes through as part of the vetting, particularly I think of what is existing currently, because my interest is really mitigating the health and the bigger security risk in as far as you know, in movements in and out of the country. But I just wanted to check with colleagues whether is there any data that you have collated, particularly both in the country and in the Western Cape, of what are the numbers before and during COVID that such an instrument you believe would actually assist. So if you do have any numbers, I'm more than happy, without answering, if you can share that information of such tourists that have been coming into the country and Western Cape in particular before and also during COVID, so that one can be able to see the demand thereof. But also, I just wanted to understand, Chair, I think with both the presentation, hopefully including the one that is coming, what is the implication, or if colleagues have thought of the implication of the current war between Russia and Ukraine and the sanctions, because there you are talking, and I think in one of the presentation it even mentions, I think Russia as one of them, I think countries and destinations that are looked at in terms of the kind of tourism work that we have been doing. Have you thought about it? If not, I'm fine. I'm happy if you can come back with it later, because it's something that has happened recently, but I'm sure it will have an impact in as far as those travelers from those countries, given what is happening in the global space. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Stander and Ms. Stofie. You can allocate accordingly, but I think a lot of it's to do with remote working.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll just comment on Member Nkondlo's. I think any geopolitical uncertainty like a war is going to unfortunately affect us, just because it's not just directly with Russia, but there will just be an uncertainty. There's going to be an increase in fuel prices, but once again, Ronel, perhaps it's something we need to. We've often, when there was a crisis, I remember in Egypt, sadly, we looked at opportunities of how we could harness that. So you never know. There's always a silver lining. So you might find that people choose to film here or do business here with us instead, to avoid certain regions, you know. But Ilse, could I ask you to address the follow-up questions from the chairperson and from Member Nkondlo, particularly the issue of the data in our regions? Thank you.
Sure, Rashid. So Chairperson, just for feedback for you, in terms of your questions about the freelancer. So the current submission doesn't deal specifically with that. It's something which we could look at in terms of expanding the requirements, because it will be mostly there. It's almost like you're self-employed. And in terms of your proof of income, so the film side, they can still come into the country, which they do. They travel in any event under the 90-day visa, which they can currently get. But it's important that it's about what this is trying to unlock is that you're employed elsewhere, so you are generating an income from your country of origin, and you're bringing that foreign direct investment into the country. So we could look at for that in almost like a different scale. The current submission didn't go into that detail, so it's a very good point which we could actually go back when Home Affairs starts, or the Department of Tourism starts looking at the actual elements in the regulations. So that's a very good point in terms of focusing there in terms of the income scale. But yes, so that's definitely in terms of a year, and then a follow-up for a second year if they have that. So it's basically focusing on your income and your employment status, even if you are self-employed. The second element in terms of Nkondlo, your question about the risk. So just to note that the state security, they do vet all visas from all countries. So it doesn't matter if you're from a remote working visa or you're from an exempted country, etc. All visas are, or all individuals coming into the country are vetted. And then from a data perspective, because we don't have that data on a domestic level, if I can just mention in terms of some of the impacts in Dubai, where they changed their regulations, and that's saw the minimum entry into the country to apply for this special type of visa was about $5,000 a month. And that's quite high. So they were really trying to attract that specifically income stream into the country. But if we could just get an opportunity, I'm sure we could resubmit to you some better statistics that I have available right now. Thank you.
Ronel, just as a sorry, Chairperson, Ronel or Monica, would you like to add? Is there any element there?
Sorry, Rashid, apologies. I've just got one thing I forgot to add about Russia. Just in events. So Russia we did see an additional travel coming through from that particular country, but I do believe that that's something which will be addressed from a national level in terms of we don't have any active marketing campaigns in that part of the world currently. And so I'm definitely sure, if I can just link on to what Rashid was saying, that's probably going to change in terms of the current state with regards to their political and concerns that we're experiencing. Thank you.
Thank you, Elsa. Ronel, would you like to add any elements of that? Or Monica?
I don't have anything to the remote working visa, but perhaps we can have a look at the film industry visa when after I've responded to some of those slides. Shall we do it then? We'll take it then.
So we'll take the film visa issues there, no problem. Back to you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that, Ms. van Skalkwyk, as well, regarding the freelancers as well, because I think one of the things that makes it quite difficult for someone to get a visa is sometimes they have to essentially give a country their whole life's CV, their whole childhood biography in order to go work somewhere. And I actually know a makeup artist that works for a very high brand in Europe that has to essentially every 3 months fly back and go somewhere and then fly back again, simply to continue the work that they're currently doing here. So that's also where I picked up some of those stories. Member van der Westhuizen, is your hand relating to this particular topic in terms of Delta or remote working?
Meet with the visas, the chair, and I cannot, and I want to fully support you. Listening to these initiatives, I again developed a bit of a concern that we may be setting the bar too high, and I think the chair has got a very good understanding of young people working remotely but doing ad hoc work, like website designs or translation services or all kinds of things that have now opened up. and that are freelancing, that they don't have a formal work or an employment agreement. They do not contribute to their own country's unemployment funds and so on. They are paid for the work that they do, and it's particularly those people that have the flexibility to tour and work, or to work remotely. So thank you, Chair, for raising that. May I just ask, on the agenda, we also have the issue of the e-visas, or the electronic visas. And what I also assumed would be some feedback on the turnaround times for people that apply for visas. You know, how easy, how difficult is it? How many areas in other countries must people you know, go to physically to apply for a visa when everything is, you know, being done online, etc. So can we get, or did I understand the notice of the meeting incorrectly, Chair? I thought it was included in the agenda, and was hoping to get a briefing on that as well.
No problem. I'm going to ask Mr. Tofay and Wesco to deal with that, and Ms. van Skalkwyk. It is in the last slide where they spoke about the e-visa pilot project. And they did answer, I had a question on that, and they did answer me on the implementation thereof. But I'm just going to ask that you just elaborate, please, because Member van der Westhuizen asked a few extra follow-ups on that particular slide. Thank you so much.
Chairperson, I'm going to ask Ilse to reply, but you're very good at getting the right people to your meetings, and I'd be the happiest person if you could get Home Affairs here to answer some of these questions on the day.
Don't tempt us.
No, I'm not tempting. I'm absolutely asking you to, because I think there's so many things we could line up and try to get some straight answers, frankly, because some of these, unfortunately, are not in our mandate. But hearing from someone at Home Affairs would be fantastic. But Ilse, do you, from our perspective, from the efforts that we make, can you perhaps address Member van der Westhuizen's question?
Sure, I'll try my best. Thanks, Rashid. So we do serve on a working group with National Department of Tourism, where we talk about visas, policies, so they've got different structures in place. So we do get updates from that perspective, but I cannot report in terms of the volume or the number, because that data will sit with Department of Home Affairs. But what we have seen is that, let's say over the last 5 years, visas was a major concern, because there was different pressures that was coming into the system in terms of the unabridged birth certificate. Then it was the fact that they changed the regulations where you had to go physically visit a embassy, etc., to apply. So, and then it was massive countries like China had a big constraint in terms of people having to fly thousands of kilometers to visit there, because there wasn't a Home Affairs everywhere, or an embassy, excuse me, in those particular different cities in the international countries. So with the announcement, two things that we've seen is there's been a massive dip. I can't recall the last time we saw complaints from a red tape perspective in terms of visas. So there's been definitely because the system is becoming easier, as well as what alluded to a decrease in terms of the pressure was the exempt countries who are mostly traveling to South Africa, which makes it much easier. So that ease of doing business effort in terms of one, you're now able to apply online, and that system is up and running in terms of that process. And two, that you're exempted has really decreased the pressure point that we were seeing with regards to visa applications. So as I mentioned, the website is live, the system is live, and you're able to apply anywhere, not just if you're wanting to travel, but also if you're an expat, you can use the portal as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think if we know anyone who's trying to come to South Africa on the e-visa system, then we'll be sure to give you some feedback. Member Makamba Bocha, welcome. You have a hand.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and my apologies for being late in the meeting, and greetings to all in the meeting. I missed on the presentation, Chairperson, but I've just got a general question pertaining to the issue of the freelance artists that are coming from other countries other than South Africa. how do they contribute to the GDP of South Africa, or rather to the tax net of South Africa? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tofi. You can allocate. I think that's a bit of a SARS question, but please assist.
It is a rather well. Thank you, Chairperson. Welcome, Member Makamba Vocha. Nice to hear from you again. Yeah, I think the important thing is the sort of the multiplier effect of a foreign visitor, someone with those expertise. What we don't realize is an artist comes into the country. Let's take, for example, someone I love, which is Abdullah Ibrahim. He would come here, and a very small percentage of the money earned during his visit, goes offshore. The rest of the investment that flows into our country is what's, I think, more important. The jobs that are created around such an event, the knock-on effect of the exposure that we get. So yeah, it's again not a direct question to ask, but I hear you. I think the balance there between some of that money going offshore versus how it impacts on us. But again, perhaps our colleagues would like to answer. Jacques, our Director for Tourism. Jacques, would you like to answer that? Again, I'm throwing people. Throwing this at you, Jacques or Ilse. Would you like to add to that?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, members. Having worked in the film industry as well, I do know that a lot of South Africans, film crew, they also work in the rest of the world. So I think it goes both ways. It's not just international crew coming here. But it's also our crew being able to work in the rest of the world. So I think, having an open kind of policy around these things does benefit South Africa as well. Thank you, Rashid.
Rashid, if I can also just add, in terms of the multiplier effect, so the intention is that they're spending money on accommodation, they're spending money on petrol, which is, again, how does it go back into our fiscus? Is through VAT mostly. They are spending money in terms of retail spend. So professional services, I have to go and see a doctor, or I have to go and utilize any other service, or I need an accountant, etc. So that, what we call disposable income, is actually being spent in the different industries within the Western Cape. So as I mentioned, if you have $5,000 a month, what are you going to be spending it on? Certain money goes home, but you also need to cover your living expenses. So similar to any tourist, but what the remote working visa is really trying to target is a higher income individual who has more flexibility. He can, we always say, stay longer and spend more, so that multiplier effect, instead of having an average trip of 14 days, they now staying here for a year. So that currently then that foreign direct investment will just be extended over that period. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think also a lot of countries appreciate our summers and even our weather sometimes during winter periods. There's no country in the world that has summer a whole year round. So sometimes in the tourism industry, because you have to do film shoots, because you have to do photo shoots, because you have to have good weather when you do certain things, you essentially migrate to a different sphere in the world. And that is what we need to encourage people to come spend their winter by us in our summer, essentially. And I think maybe this is also a question for SARS, since we've already built up a nice relationship in the budget committee. Maybe in finance, we should also actually just ask SARS, just give us the statistics and the data, because maybe that will also help the Western Cape government in terms of their planning and strategies. But colleagues, without further ado, we have our last presentation that just needs to be presented now, and that is on the film permits specifically. Mr. Tofe will be assisting us with those particular slides.
So Ilse will reflight the 2 slides, and Renelle will lead out, and then have the support of Monica, who I believe is settled. You know, these film people, we can't expect her to be in an office. She's on site doing a thing. So apologies earlier when she was still on the road.
No problem. If Miss Rowick was not out and about, busy living her best life, trying to attract film and industry, then that would have been a problem probably. We don't want her in an office. We want her busy working, doing the actual work on the ground. Thank you so much. You may go ahead. I'm just going to put my video off.
Sure. Over to you, Renelle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you, Rashid, and good morning to everyone in the room. I'm very pleased that Monica is now settled, and she's going to help me to answer some of the questions. She was trying to, do the presentation while she was in an Uber, and I'm really going to summarize what she said. So I'm not going to go through the presentation step by step. I just really want to summarize what she said. I want to confirm to the committee that the objective is to grow the film industry in the Western Cape. Fortunately, the film industry visa process is working well, and that has largely been facilitated by a website that has been set up. And the website is really, if you want to, it's called the Film Industry Visa Assistance. So Foxtrot India, VA and Alpha, yeah, forgot what V was, Victor Alpha. So that is the website, and at the moment, Monica and the team are busy helping 50 companies to facilitate the visa support into the Western Cape. In addition to visa assistance, we also support these organizations with providing location assistance. We also work, the second big area that we look after is marketing and upskilling. And we would be very happy, and I hope that Monica's arranged for this, but I'd be very happy to provide the committee with the Filmmakers Guide to the Western Cape. We're very proud of the piece of work that we've done. We also have inbound missions, and one of the highlights, or the ones that I would like to perhaps call out, is Wave Scale Conservation and Adventure Film Festival. So that is something that's happening, that will be happening during March. An outbound mission, we've got 3 outbound missions coming up, and the first is the Europe Film Market. The other one is the SXSW Festival, which is happening in Houston in the US in March, and we've got a team going out to that. And then we also have a film festival happening in New York later on in the year. So there's a lot of matchmaking activities going on, where we either bringing investors into, or filmmakers into Cape Town, but we also obviously going outside to go and attract them to the Western Cape. In addition to that, there's a lot of research work that is taking place, and we're looking at how we can obviously improve the environment for our filmmakers. We're very excited because there's some very big ticket productions taking place at the moment. Obviously, because we're under NDA, we can't speak about them. But one of the ones that is in the media, which is the filming of Mission Impossible, it is in the media, so we can share that. It's obviously not in the Western Cape at the moment, but it is in Mpumalanga. But there are connections, obviously, with the Cape Town Film Studio. And later on, we've also been supporting a lot of producers, obviously, from the UK, Russia, India, France, Australia, the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany. So the list is endless, and I think the world certainly is our oyster here in the Western Cape for the film industry. So I definitely look forward to meeting with all of the members a little bit later this morning. Myself and Monica will be hosting you at the Cape Town Film Studio. And I will leave it at that. Thank you very much. Monica, I don't know if there's anything that you would like to add at this time.
Thank you, Renelle. That was brilliant. And I do apologize for my earlier mishap, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you so much. And we look forward to engaging with you a little bit later on. Colleagues, I'm going to take questions now. If none, I have one. Okay, I'm going to go ahead with mine then. I don't see any hands. I saw on the slide that you can apply for the film permits online, but on the slide also it only really speaks to when you're applying for in the city of Cape Town. And I know, for example, sometimes the film industry, they go into the different regions within the Western Cape to film. I know, for example, in the Karoo, there's been filming there as well. So how do they go about when they're going to a different region outside the city of Cape Town? Do they apply with that municipality? Do they still apply online on this particular website? If you can just maybe take us through that particular process. Thank you. Any other questions? Going once? Van der Westhuizen, I see your hand. Any other hands? Okay, maybe Ms. Thunder and Ms. Rowick covered it so well that there's no hands. Thank you so much. You may go ahead with answer. Sorry, Member Van der Westhuizen, you may ask your question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you. I must say, I travel often past the film studios. I stay in Stellenbosch and obviously need to be at Parliament. And I'm really looking forward to seeing, what I, up to now, have only been able to observe from the N2. My question is not so related to the film studio itself, but rather film teams making use of other venues or other, do you call it, sites in the Western Cape. I happen to be privileged to serve on the town council of the old Franschhoek municipality. Now the Franschhoek Pass and some of the surrounding nature areas at that stage proved to be very popular with people that wanted to shoot advertisements, etc., particularly for motor cars and so on. And we unfortunately experienced at one stage that, film crews would come in, and when they leave, they would leave behind a lot of litter. There would be some environmental damage, etc. So we, at that stage, then developed a protocol whereby people had to apply for permits, and they even had to pay for, can I call it, an environmental control officer, which we provided to ensure that, that kind of bad taste is not left behind. And obviously, I never got feedback as to how our regulations have been accepted by the film industry. It's one thing of making laws and regulations, but I think the important aspect is then to get some feedback as to say, well, you've now gone overboard, you're making it just too difficult, as we've seen perhaps with some visa applications and so on. So would you, if you wouldn't mind just giving us some feedback? It seems to me that may be part of your, can I call it, the standard set of regulations that you are developing and proposing and advocating for such probably private and public landowners. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And just to add on to Member Van der Westhuizen's question, if you can just indicate to us the film permits that they pay. If you pay the film permit, does the money go to the city? Does the money go to the municipality? Does the money go to the province? Who do you technically pay your permit to? Thanks.
So I'm not sure. Should I just take those technical questions and then Renelle maybe could speak to our strategy? If that's okay, Renelle, may I just jump in?
Yes, please. Jump in, Monica. Thank you.
So Westboro has been working on a strategy to make the province more film ready. And when Renelle kindly summarized my presentation, that was what I was trying to say, how exciting it has been working on an action plan to really help everyone understand film readiness. And Honourable Member Van der Westhuizen, your question is correct. Are our permits too onerous? If we're too onerous, they'll go other places. But I want to say the feedback is together we are developing best practice. It has to be balanced. You have to leave a site better or at least the same than when you came. Everyone becomes ambassadors for this beautiful place, and we want to make it safe and clean. And having an eco on set is a minimum. Having now a COVID officer on set is now a minimum and an extra cost. And the reason you all had to get tested before coming here is because this bubble is like a foreign country. But our COVID standards are also really, really brilliant. Our safety standards, all of these standards have to be clear because people can plan. Now, when you go and it's higgledy-piggledy and people don't understand the film industry, then it becomes onerous. And that's what our plan is, working with the districts. We're doing quarterly meetups. Online is really helping. Ansel and Ilse's team at DDAT and Lisa and the team at Wesgrow are meeting with all the municipalities to talk about which bylaws are working, because a mandate actually lays with the landowners in the end, and who's ever holding that in trust, which would usually be the municipal manager or a working group such as your own for the Franschhoek Pass. We work with Cape Nature. We did it. One of the 22 events we did last year was with Cape Nature, and now they've summarized their whole process. It's in our Creative Locations update, which is available online. We're just printing 200 of each, the Creative Locations and of the Filmmaker's Guide. We're very proud of those. Minister Mainier put a presentation, welcome, in the new book. And it just describes this ecosystem, which we're trying to make world-class, film-friendly, and the global standard is cost recovery. To answer the chair's question and to wrap up, the money goes to who's ever doing the permitting. And if you have to put an eco on set, you're going to have to pay the eco. And if that eco is a staff member of the municipality or the district, or that a special purpose vehicle like a Cape Nature, then you would have to pay them on top of the other permits you would need. Like if you're flying a drone, you would need Civil Aviation Authority permission, etc. So once you get all the permits, then you can get a sign off for the whole shoot. It is not an event, it is film. It is specialized, there's no public. All the indemnity leaves the room for public liability for events, but you do have business liability. So when there's costs to manage that, like put extra traffic officers in, then you would pay that as a cost recovery basis. So we don't want to price ourselves out. We don't want to pay too much, but we also want to pay our fair share. And the whole value chain of having a 100 million rand film shooting in your district for 6 weeks. You're filling the hotels, you're buying petrol, you're tipping the car guards, you're putting up tents, you're hiring those tents locally. So it is a huge moneymaker, and having the correctly priced permits work. And I'm going to give the example, and to close, Stellenbosch overpriced. People left to other beautiful towns. They then said, but we can give you a discount if you ask. And it was quite a joke during our annual filmmakers meetup, where we discussed the upcoming rule changes, that just look for that, ask for the discount, and it went back to their old rates because they couldn't change their permit prices at the time quickly enough. But we want to be cost neutral to industry because it's all about the rest of the business. But we also don't want to, batter people's permit fiscus. We want to carry our load. In any case, those parts of the province that do not yet have this, Wesgrow and the team at DDAT are helping them to look at what might be best practice, and we're helping move forward some bylaws that work. And we're very excited that quite a few, like Drakenstein and Garden Route, are well ahead of the curve. Some of them are online, like the city, but we're all working towards that wonderful space with the province's help. Thank you. Over to you, Renelle.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I think those are all the questions that were posed. Member Nkondlo, you can go ahead.
Chair, I'm interested, I think, in what Monica has just explained, in terms of the permitting and related issues. One, are there specific spaces in a municipality that would be authorized and enabled for filming, or is just an open season anywhere a production company has identified those spaces they believe would work for their film, they can be able to do that. And this links to the bylaw question that you were just raising. So I'm interested to understand whether there are such in the different municipalities, and do you have enabled specified bylaws as it regards to filming in that? And secondly, as far as that is concerned, what would be the kind of support given to local emerging film production companies, especially from young people? Actually, I remember at some point I referred one young person from Guguletu, whom they've been doing some dancing and they wanted to sort of move this into a full production. So they needed assistance. So what kind of assistance, and in particular in the permitting space, with whatever cost implications, what kind of regime is enabled at that point? And actually, how that linked to your historically disadvantaged communities, townships? And that is why I was asking the question if you've got ring-fenced areas, because if somebody wants to do a film in Kailicha as an example, and I'm not sure whether there are some that have been done in the past, pardon my ignorance on the matter, but how do you deal with such issues so that also local content can actually be promoted through the filming permitting? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you so much, Member Nkonda. I think, if Ms. Skalkwyk remembers correctly, I think there was also a young female girl from Cape Town who actually wanted to do a reality TV that I referred to Westkrow, and I'm not sure how that went, but I'm hoping that she came right. Member Maseko?
Thank you very much, Chair. I think Member Nkonzo have covered me. I just wanted to find out if there is the standard matrix that the filming they do have in Western Cape for the LED for the municipalities, because we've got a very beautiful province, that the filming can happen anywhere in this province, so that it becomes a guidance for the municipalities to know what can be the ripple effect when filming happens and there's no cleaning or there's no leaving the site as they left it, because we cannot expose our beautiful province to scenarios that we lose that uniqueness that we have in this province. So if there is municipalities maybe that already have received that information, which are those municipalities that you see filming being interested, and those metrics that you do have, is it working for them? And maybe Westkrow can tell us if they've shared that with the municipalities for their LEDs also to sell their beautiful municipalities. It becomes sort of a way of municipalities to take pride in what they do have and to sell those municipalities in the outside world that they can use for generation of revenue. So it will maybe add value to trigger something within municipalities that in fact we can use the natural resources just as the artistic landscapes that we have for filming to happen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. As you can hear, the members are very proud of our province. Member Makamba Bocha.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. My question is just in addition to what Member Nkonda have asked in terms of transformation. I just want to know from the department if they have any programs that are there to enhance transformation, taking into account the historical background of South Africa. Thank you, Chair. So are there any programs that are in place to make sure that other people that are previously advantaged are also part and parcel of the industry? Thanks.
Thank you so much. Ms. Stander and Rovik, you can allocate the questions as you wish. I'm going to just put my video off for you in the meantime.
Monica, over to you. Nice, short, crisp answers. Thank you.
Thank you. So the research is really showing that film-induced tourism works. The Netflix brand South Africa SA Tourism Research actually chose 2 of 3 big TV projects to measure the impact. One of them being My Octopus Teacher, which won the BAFTA and Oscar last year, and it has driven the awareness of our region and our beautiful African sea forest up by 70% of people wanting to come and experience adventure tourism. And the TV series by Gambit Film called Blood and Water has increased the cultural aspect of people wanting to come to the province. Gambit Film, we helped recently go to the States with Indemnity, which was a huge a thriller, and people jumping off buildings in Cape Town with all the beautiful scenery in the background. They've now landed on the strength of that project a series of 3 films based on Leon Ayres. With regard to that,
I'm going to mute everyone else in the background. Just quickly see here, because otherwise we hear background noise. I just ask that if you're not on the floor, that you just keep your mic off. Otherwise, we're going to struggle to hear each other in the various different municipalities that we're currently sitting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Film Industry Fund, when big companies give a permit cost, they then donate to the Film Industry Fund. This was set up as a brand exercise. It has already bought 2 CDs for NRSI. It's put in libraries. I've been to these beautiful district libraries where the portable libraries come in, and they're not just dumped there. They're partnering with NGOs that keep teachers in early childhood development skilled at that level to maintain the reading and so forth. So they're active giving back. And there's always a sign from the film industry, jungle gyms. If you have an NPO that needs money, that industry fund is looking to spend. Getting into the industry, the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition has their major incentives. Most of them are skewed to previously PDIs. They're called the BEE fund is 50%. Wesgrow helps a lot of companies grow to that size so they can start looking at those funds. Obviously, the National Film and Video Foundation skews their development funds to previously disadvantaged creatives, and we help through all the B2Bs, help people find the right experienced partners to take advantage of that. And then the last question for me, I think the upskilling goes both ways, and we want to make sure that the districts are keeping research. The City of Cape Town does keep the number of their permits. Part of our strategy in this upskilling across the province, as people look at their permitting process, that they keep the data. Don't tell us how much you're paying your talent, but tell us how much you're spending below the line. How much petrol did you buy locally? How much food did you buy locally? How many bed nights did you spend? And then that can help the LED managers understand the importance of this. And of course, to try to get people onto the sets, the film industry, Film SA, runs a major project. When you get our Filmmakers Guide to Africa, you can see some of the numbers in there. And these are top young creatives. They're on the big productions, and they're developing their own projects, and they're going to do them. They are doing them. And of course, the global studios are putting funds into the country right now. Netflix is running a Pan-African fund for short films to do with folklore, and a number of South African companies are in there. And I can't wait to see those short films. And obviously, the best in class will go to feature or TV series. Let's hope. CEO, would you like to take up anything I left, please?
No, I think you've covered that beautifully. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all the work that you're doing. about 2 years ago, there was a group of young, about my age, young group of Black artists that came to me. They were very upset about the copyright bills and things like that. So I'm very happy that things like that aren't necessarily going forward anymore, because they were worried about their work being taken away from them. And I'm also happy to hear of some of the programs that are being run in the film industry, so that our young youth in our province are also able to take advantage of the work that you're doing. Ms. van Skalkwyk?
Thank you, Chair. Just to add as well, in addition to the municipality, so just to give that a little bit of context, most municipalities, the film, they deal with it, they've got a film permit and they've got an event permit. The majority of the municipalities in the Western Cape, they actually have dealt with it through the event permit, because they didn't have the mechanism or the bylaw that spoke to film, even though it triggers some of the same things from a permissions to a town planning approval, etc. So the work that the team has been doing with Ansel and my team is, and the great work that Monica and Lisa does, is working with the municipalities to start looking at how do we standardize the bylaws, so the legislative requirements across the 30 municipalities in the Western Cape. So that is key in terms of making sure, as the previous member indicated, that there's a consistent approach in terms of our standards and our quality of service and what's required and what's allowed and is not allowed. So that's the one thing. And then the second thing is the great work that our Ease of Doing Business team have been doing, where they've been piloting with some of the municipalities to get their film approvals online. So that's in addition. So it's one, address it from a policy perspective, two, address it from a system perspective, so that we make it easy as possible. We were just talking about remote or visa applications, as long as the system works. That's the other thing. And then it's just in terms of to try and lobby and address some of the concerns we've got with DTIC in terms of the disaster with the situation with regards to the incentive grant to assist the ecosystem in landing the films. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I think, Ms. Skalkwyk, if you are able to just send us just the list of municipalities who currently have the film permits that you can apply for, that have the event permits that you can apply for, and then for each you mentioned that you're helping some of them to get them online now. If we can just have a list of who is currently online with their respective permits, so that if the committee in the future, if we need to maybe assist with some type of oversight, that we can at least know beforehand what are we currently dealing with. Thank you so much. Member Mkondlo?
Thanks, Chair. And hopefully, Elsa, thanks for the explanation. Because indeed, you know, our municipalities must play a catch-up. And because when we consider economic recovery, it's very good to talk about it at a high level of a provincial and a national economy. Where the COVID has hit is at local levels with households. So if municipalities are not catching up, which I'm sure, I mean, this committee, since I've joined, even in the previous year, from a tourism perspective, you know, we have been raising this matter of trying to check up and help our municipalities, you know, in as far as some of these innovations, because if you consider their bylaws, they are still highly backward, and they are not in a way, you know, meeting up with the speed of technological advancement, let alone, you know, new growth, in particular when it comes to issues which I think the sector that Chair always represent, the youth, you know, will be talking about, which becomes a limitation, because as young people get very edgy and anxious about the type of ideas they come up with, but which are not enabled. And for me, it's not even about BEE. It's about just allowing, you know, a system to work so that people, when they want to do things, they are enabled to do them. So I'm very happy, and I would like to really see the type of permit, if you do have, you know, in the request made by the Chair, a permit, what is the kind of permit, including the event one? If we can just see both, because I would really be happy of such a standardized, you know, kind of a process that enables such, because I mean, if you even go outside of the city of Cape Town, in the small towns. I mean, you've got beautiful landscapes. I mean, we were recently in the West Coast, and we can attest to that, where such a filming opportunities can actually be enabled for both locals and the international production companies. So I'm happy, and I'm hoping, Chair, at a certain point, the colleagues indeed are engaging. And I heard Monica speaking about, the LED, and you would recall that one of the challenges, or the report we're getting from DDED from a tourism perspective, is how first in the budget cuts will always be the tourism in the tourism space. And I think we need to always engage that paradigm, so that there's a shift in understanding tourism as a economic imperative more than just, leisure. Because I think until we get to that point, particularly for municipalities, I think in my long-winded way, what I'm trying to say, I'm appreciating, I think, the kind of work that you colleagues are doing. But I think indeed, Chair, we need to be focusing on how municipalities are enabling and assisting, the great kind of innovation being done in this particular space, so that more people can participate and thereby, benefit out of it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Mr. Tofe?
I could just add, I wanted to just be specific. We can send you a reply about the municipalities, but the municipalities that we've actually instituted this online application system are is Knysna, as Ilse has spoken about, Drakenstein, and particularly the Stellenbosch area, on the west coast, in the Cederberg municipality, and then also in Theewaterskloof. So those are the specific ones, but I'm happy to send you some of the details and how those are currently being used. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Quick question. In the Drakenstein area, is the Stellenbosch municipality, or is it the district?
My understanding, mail in front of me, is that. No, sorry, go ahead.
Stellenbosch is on its own, Drakenstein is PAL in the area, so it has to be whether the side of PAL or the side of Stellenbosch. Those are two different municipalities.
Thank you. So, Mr. Tofe, you can just indicate to us, is it with two different permitting systems for them, or is it one big permit system for everyone there?
Unfortunately, that system doesn't work across the district at the district level. It's at a specific municipal level. So in this case, I'm aware of it in the Stellenbosch area. But let us reply to you in writing with some of that detail. And it's a good question. Maybe it's something we need to, whenever someone says something like that, it looks like a good idea. Maybe we should move towards that and address it at a district level, but may not be as easy. Ilse would know better. She's lived and worked in that space, because it's about the actual bylaws within municipalities. Remember, that's where the strengths really lie. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, any additional answers or add-ons?
If I can just add, Chairperson, so it's definitely the reason why the system is implemented at a municipal level is it's got to do with, one, the municipal bylaw, so who's issuing the permit, and two, as Monica alluded to earlier, it's about the landowner. So where does that sit? So that's why if a district would have to do it, there's nothing that stops with them, but it doesn't operate like that because of they don't have a municipal bylaw in essence, so they don't issue an event permit or a full permit. That's why the system would need to operate at a municipal level, although many times the district municipalities would serve on that committee. In Knysna, that was the case. They would serve on that committee in terms of the health, the health certificate, because that is a district function. So if a health certificate was required, they would then serve on the committee to provide the approval. But at the end of the day, the system and the issuer of the permit would be at a municipal level. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mustande?
Chair, just maybe to make an observation that all of the topics that we discussed this morning, the remote working visa, the film industry visa, increasing direct flights to the Western Cape, is all actually about bringing economic activity into the Western Cape. And by increasing economic activity in the Western Cape, that obviously means more jobs. And I think that it really is an opportunity right now because people are looking for alternative places to travel. As we can see, destinations around the world, closing and opening and closing. And it really is an opportunity for us to make it easier for people to come into the Western Cape. Allocation, the weather, all of that is really, really a premier. And you can see the passion of the people that have spoken today about how, we're going out there and grabbing some of these opportunities. But we do need the help of the committee as well, in the standardization of the laws, if you can help with that, if you can help with getting the parties talking about incentives, if we can look at how we can get the International Air Services Licensing Council established so that we can actually get some of those permits going as well. So I think thank you for the opportunity to share on some of these issues.
Thank you so much. And I think going to the studio and also seeing for ourselves is also really going to assist us when we think about things like resolutions and stuff like that. I do know we've been to Mossel Bay and George, and they actually told us about how they're trying to work on making their permitting system better. If I remember correctly, it was an energy visit. I think Mossel Bay was the one that's trying to get their stuff online at the moment. I must now remember quite clearly now, but I think it was Mossel Bay. Member Maseko?
Sorry, Chair, maybe if you can indulge me out of the issue of the filming, should have asked this question. I just want to find out, I think the last time there was the issue of the increasing the terminals at the airport for the airport precincts, and the plans were out there. How far is that going now, since it seems that there's a problem of that? And we had a plan of increasing the terminals and anticipating something like this of the Delta Airport coming in. So how far is it? Did the National agree to that increasing of the terminals? And if that's the case, why would they stop the other one? Why would they delay while they knew that that was coming with the plans that you had initially? Or am I getting my facts wrong one way or another?
Thank you, Member Maseko. I think that's more of a AXA, and I was actually mentioning earlier in the meeting that I miss Bianca. She always seems like someone who's able to find connections and money as well. But Mr. Tofe, Ms. Thunder, if you have information and updates for us, if you can please share.
Perhaps HOD and Minister could also add in their closing, but fortunately, we have AXA in our air access community, so we do get updates from the AXA general manager. And sadly, it was actually a runway extension, Member Mkontlo. It wasn't a terminal, so they are actually still upgrading terminals. That's why there's a lot of disruption. That investment is continuing, but it was the runway extension or the addition of a new runway that was going to deal with a potentially huge influx in inbound flights. Sadly, both because of the dip we've had because of COVID and a retraction of that level of billions of rands of investments within AXA, it's been put on ice. That's what we've heard. I think as the demand returns, AXA would look at would look at reinvesting. But I think the Minister will comment on that when we close. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Minister, are you online with us? I see you're still online, but I'm not sure if we're a bit of a radio in the background.
I'm with you.
Wonderful. We have come to the end of the presentations. Minister, if you want to make any closing remarks or if you have any updates maybe on AXA and the investment there for the runway, then this is your moment now.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think that Rashid Tofi has summarized it well. The latest information that I have is that the investment into the second runway was put on hold. But of course, I would be very happy to check in once again with Mark McLean. And if there have been any new developments, we'd be very happy to inform the committee. I think just 3 points in closing. I think on the issue of Delta Airlines, we have demonstrated that through the intergovernmental dispute, we are making some progress. And although we have not had any substantive response, the minister's latest letter and his appeal to provide him with some time to deal with the matter urgently, I think, provides me with some hope that we will now, in the very near future, resolve this matter. We have not managed to show, I think, similar progress when it comes to the whole question of matters that reside under Home Affairs, remote work visas, e-visas, the backlog in issuing visas, even in the film industry, and of course the significant backlog in issuing passports. And Chairperson, I mean, to tag onto an earlier discussion, is obviously within the scope of the committee, but I do think if the committee had an appetite, it may well be a good thing to have a separate hearing with Home Affairs to hear their views on and get a first-hand update on progress, particularly in relation to remote work visas, e-visas, and then backlogs in issuing visas and passports. My last remark, I'm obviously today not able to do the cool stuff, but I really do hope the committee enjoys the visit to the Cape Town Film Studios. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say to Minister, to the department, I'm not sure if I see Mr. Fourie also maybe listening to us as a radio. I think I saw him a bit online earlier, but also Mr. Tofa, your team, and Ms. Thunder in your team, and also Ms. Rovik and your team at Film Studios. Thank you so much for the particular briefing. It's very near to the committee's heart, is about jobs and job creation, but also creating an environment where people can invest within our province and also assist us in growing our provincial economy. And we do look forward to seeing you in a little while. With that, members, I'm just going to ask that we take a short break. We did end a little bit earlier. So I'm going to first just allow the officials, you are welcome to now log off and go about your day-to-day operations if you're not joining us at the film studio. And then I'm just going to ask Ms. Adams as our procedural officer just to give us some information on logistics within the next little while. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, Ms. Adams,
Thank you.
we are a little bit ahead of schedule, but I'm sure that you're very happy about that. If you can maybe give us some information regarding logistics going forward now.
Thank you, Chair. The logistics haven't changed much from what was emailed to members, so we will meet there at the gates at 11:30. The tour will end at 12:30. We'll be taken on golf carts. They have said to wear comfortable flat shoes. Those who have indicated their attendance at the tour have done their PCR test and have the results. I've printed for those that have indicated and we'll bring that along. And we just ask the members also bring along the signed NDAs and the IDs as well. And also, I'm not sure if members maybe want to scan the NDAs in just for their own records. You can keep a record of that as well. And then, yeah, I think
just we can take a photo of our respective documentation. Yeah. You don't need to scan, just take a photo.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that covers almost everything.
Thank you so much. And those who are at WCPP, we're meeting for traveling at 11:45.
Yeah, but that's just us.
Okay, so that's for those who are traveling from the WCBP. For those who are meeting us there, we are starting the tour at 11:30. So if you can be maybe a few minutes early, just to make sure that you make sure there's enough time for checking in and signing your name and so on. Member van der Westhuizen?
Since we are finishing a little bit earlier, I was wondering whether we would be able to travel 15 minutes earlier to the film studios. But I'm in your hands. I will be traveling from Stellenbosch and looking forward to meeting you there. But I do think we do have the time on hand.
Ms. Adams, what is the possibility of starting a bit earlier? I'm not sure what the film studio schedule is like. I must say that they are going to take us on a particular set that is, to my knowledge, quite expensive, and that they're making some special arrangements for us to see some special items, which is also relating to the NDA and stuff like that. So I'm not sure there's a specific time that that set is only expecting us. Ms. Adams?
Thank you, Chair. I can ask Ms. Rovik, and then I can get back to members. I'll probably send a message over the group chat on WhatsApp if we can leave 15 minutes earlier, but also bear in mind that we do have an annual report to consider as well.
Okay. Because we didn't put that on today, I'm going to ask that we actually just hold the annual report over. I don't think any members have necessarily been prepared for the particular annual report for today. What we'll then do is, please, members, watch your WhatsApps in case we are able to leave about 15 minutes earlier. If we do leave 15 minutes earlier, Ms. Adams will then message you by 25 minutes past 10, because then we will be then essentially leaving at 10:30 if we are leaving earlier. And for those then that are arriving at the film studios, 15 minutes earlier would then be 11:15. So if you are able to meet there a little bit earlier, I would encourage it. Colleagues, with that, I'm just also going to remind you, please don't take any photos when we get there unless they are authorized. There are, for example, if there are film crews on set, and part of their agreement with the film studio is that some of their information is kept confidential so that people don't know necessarily that they are filming until the matter is in the public. For example, Mission Impossible is in the public in Mpumalanga, for example, so it's not like they need to hide something like that. But other films aren't necessarily within the public domain in terms of information. But we will take guidance from the film studio on that. With that, colleagues, thank you so much. Technically, we are not adjourning, but for the sake of the online MST meeting, we are adjourning the online part or suspending, and then we will continue on the oversight. Thank you so much. See you soon.